runs. He's still got Mackay, still got Mackay, still got Mackay, and Mackay goals.
Gibbons talking about selling candy and kicking a beauty.
What about this short ball inside 50? Control from nowhere. Wasting no time, Jack Newnes. Set shot. He strikes it beautifully. He's got it. The Blues win it. Jack Newnes, after the siren, has won the game for Carlton. That is unbelievable.
Hello and welcome to the Navy Blue Corner. I'm Ian Brownie. I'm joined as always by my good mate, Lockie Lydiard. And the trade period is edging closer and closer. Me and Lockie, we've done the list analysis. So, this is where we plan to make our moves. In this episode, we'll be going over all the trade scenarios, looking at who comes in, who makes way for the newbies. And look, Lockie and I, we spent some time doing our research, putting, our Nick Austin hats on, and we've prepared our ideal trade scenarios if we were in charge of list management. So look, Lockie, without further ado, lay out your trade plans for me.
Oh, mate, I was up very late last night putting this together. So the listeners will have to excuse me if I've made some fundamental error in this calculation. But yeah, I suppose the first little part of my research was trying to look at some comparable trades in previous years as well, with the whole Chera scenario, which was quite challenging. So I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on these as well. So I'll start off with the first thing for me would be get Hewitt in as a free agent. He's a no-brainer to me that he wants to come, and I think the type of player that he is will be brilliant for us, age bracket, all those kind of things. I'm sure we can dissect each of these at the end. Is that what you're after?
Yeah, definitely. That's what I was looking to do. All
right. Here's where it gets a bit fun. So this is, I don't want to say that I'm working off one of Cooney's mega trades.
Oh no.
But it's looking at West Coast and Fremantle kind of together. So here's the second move for me is to trade SBS to West Coast.
Yep.
Along with pick 25 and our future second.
Ooh. That's big.
What are we going to get back for that? We're going to get
it's a lot.
We're going to get Brander back. Now, you got to stick with me here. They're pick 10.
Ooh.
And they're pick 35.
Plus 35. Okay, let's break that down. Okay, this maybe we will need to break some of these down. So yes, you've given away SPS 25, which is our second rounder this year, and our second rounder next year. We've brought in 10, 35, and Brander. Yeah, that's I think you've done okay there because you've basically given. I think we can almost assume that SPS's value is around a second rounder. I think it sounds like that's what they're saying in the media. So we've pretty much given 3 second rounders away for a first round pick, 35, which is the second rounder. And then you've brought in Brander, who could be anywhere from second to third. Who knows? He's an out of contract player, maybe like an SPS.
Yeah.
I think you've done well there. I'm not 100% sure how eager that would be to give away 10, I suppose. Give me your reasoning why you've backed this trade in to happen.
For sure. Well, I like how you've broken that down. The way that I looked at it was SBS and Brander kind of are in similar positions with each team, but I think most people would agree that SBS's value in the long term is higher. So putting him a bit higher above Brander. Then if you just look at the two kind of pick swaps, not to get too into the nitty-gritty with the points side of things, but assuming that our second rounder next year is probably, we'll say it's around similar to this year, so 25 to 30, I think that makes it pretty fair. I hope I'm not being too biased from our side of things. I definitely agree that, West Coast giving away their top pick is difficult. It might be a difficult sell, but I think for them, a young midfielder in SBS who wants to be there to come in, Brander, who's clearly on the outs with them, they were playing him out of position from where he wanted to play. He's not worth a hell of a lot to them, but would be to us. Doing my best to look at it from West Coast side and to see that, look, we're going to get SBS in and then 2 picks around 25. And the other kind of little side of it was that West Coast have 5 picks this year, which is a bit silly. So this would also allow them to have 4 picks this year and move one of those to next year with our future.
Yeah, look, I definitely like your reasoning there. Probably my one issue is I've just done a quick look up on the value indicator for the actual draft picks. 10 and 35 equates to basically 1,900 points. Then I've chucked in 25 and I've said, let's say 28 is our second round of next year. That is basically 1,400. So we've got 1,900 for is basically what we would get, and we're giving away 1,400. So I think there's a little bit of the discrepancy. Maybe you're saying that is where the SPS is valued over Brander. I just feel like maybe with that one, maybe I'm trying to win this trade scenario here, and that's why my bias is showing. I don't feel like West Coast would maybe give 35 back. I reckon. Do you know what the pick is that they have straight after 35? Let me have a quick look here.
I think it might be in the 40s.
49. Let me see what that does, and if that gets it, edges up a little bit closer. Yeah, so that would make it basically 1,600 to 1,400. I reckon if we got 49 instead, that would maybe be a bit even, or maybe we get 35, give them a fourth rounder or something back. Who knows? But
I like it.
I like that. I think it's close. I think we might be slightly winning on that one, which is always good. Maybe Nick Austin literally put his foot down. And that's what's happening. Lockie's in the trade room, and you're a good negotiator, Adora style. But yes, so hit me with the next one, Lockie. Where have you gone from there?
If the general media can give their stamp on, how much these players are worth and what they should be getting, I think it's only fair that we do as well. But yeah, I like your thinking with the 49, but you might see here why I went for a little bit higher. The aim here is to keep our pick 6. So the next deal that we would do is those 2 picks, 10 and 35, and that's straight for Chera.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I was looking at some of these deals recently, and it's really hard to find a comparable, but some of the ones that I thought was somewhat similar. Brad Hill in 2016, when he went to Fremantle, that year he was 23 years old and he averaged 17 disposals. He was pick 23. Charlie Cameron, when he went to Brisbane, that was a year, he was 23 years old as well, 14 disposals, bit over a goal a game. That was pick 12, which I thought was considerable. And then the other one that I thought was a good indicator was when Neil went to Brisbane. So that was Neil and 30 for 6, 19 and 55. So, do you think, what do you think is bigger value? Neil then at 25 years old or Chera now at 22?
Definitely Neil. I think at that stage he was definitely above a Chera, and that's why they got so much more for him back. I think Chera, he's a real promising player, has shown bits, and he's almost ready to explode, but he isn't that bona fide absolutely star midfielder that I think Neil was at that stage. He ended up winning a Brownlow a couple of years later, so I think that was so clear that he was already one of the best and then became the best, whereas Chera's probably by age, to be honest, is a couple of years younger than that. Went early in the draft at pick 4, I believe, so he's had a couple of years in the system now, so if anything, he's only better than what they had for him. And it's not as if, I understand, and maybe we'll get into this as well, talking about the exact value of Chera later. I understand why Freo are simply saying, we want stuff for him. I get he's out of contract, and that's a whole nother debate. But they don't want to lose him. They're only really losing him because COVID's been tough and he really wants to come back to Victoria for family reasons. So I think if you were to do, say a pick 6, that's probably close to being exactly right. If you throw in he's out of contract, wants to leave, close to the pick he was drafted. Pick 10 floats out a little bit. That ends up being, I think, 12 with some father-sons. So that's why I understand exactly why you've gone, well, that's probably unders even more than maybe a 6 is. And if they're debating a pick back, a 35 in a second round and makes do, are we able to potentially get something back again, like a fourth in that to really just steak knives it? I don't know, but I think I definitely agree that you couldn't just give 10 for Chera, so I like that you've done 35. And to turn really, SPS, and 2 second rounders, basically into Chera and Brander.
Spot on.
I think you've done pretty well there. I think you've absolutely won. So I'm pretty happy with that. Have you made any other moves apart from that?
That was all the moves. I think part of this, I'm not normally one to do this, but I had a bit of a look through and read some of the players in the top 10 and to see if there was any that excited me about who we'd go for. I'm not sure if you've done that. But Mac Andrew.
Oh. Tell me everything you know about this man.
The 200 centimetre ruckman seems like a bit of a prospect selection. Not going to come in and be good to go round one next year, but exciting looking fella who can just move well around the ground. Knock the ball down to the hit out and then gather it himself. Just kind of like what you picture every ruckman to kind of look like in a few years. And I think pick 6, if we can keep it, which obviously move out to 8, I would be looking to use to grab him to have our, bolster our ruck stocks for the years to come for me.
Yeah, look, it's a decent pick. He's definitely looks like he will go very early, probably the best ruckman in the draft. I guess I've got a question for you on that when looking at ruck stocks. We chatted a bit about it last week and who we need to bring in to support Pito and TDK. I think both of us were believing that TDK is probably like the future. So I guess with that, is your position maybe changing a little bit, thinking that TDK is maybe more that second ruckman mold where he goes forward a little bit more and that this new man, big old Daddy Mac Andrew comes in and eventually becomes the key ruckman? Are you going for a tandem thing there? Is that your idea? Because I guess maybe I'm looking at it slightly different, and maybe we'll see that in my plans where I think we almost need a bit more of an experienced ruckman to go with, I guess, the 24-year-old inexperienced Pitternet, I think he's 25 now, sorry, and then the young TDK as well. I guess what's your thoughts on why you went younger over maybe a more experienced player?
Yeah, I hadn't necessarily thought about it as in years down the line. I think for me at this stage, this isn't something that I've seen discussed a lot, but I think in this scenario where Brander comes in, West Coast playing him up on the wing where it seems like he wants to be more of a key position guy. At 195 centimetres, I think he can be someone that can help pinch hit in the ruck as well. And I think it might be interesting, at least for a year, to keep exploring this kind of ruck by committee where TDK is the number one, but JSOS and Brander and Cripps and Harry, if it's deep forward, other guys kind of helping out. With Pitt being the number one backup solution, not in the best 22. So I was more thinking about this draft pick being someone that, again, we might not even see next year. I totally get your opinion why you would want somebody more mature, and I think I might have even said that at one stage. But yeah, I'm interested to see who you're going to be targeting for that then.
Yeah, I definitely. And I guess your last 2 picks that you've picked up, you're looking at the rookie draft and preseason. Is that where you're going with the rest of these 2 players that you have to bring in? Because the league have said you must take a minimum 3 over all of the drafts. There's about 17 of them. But yeah, they all count. Where have you gone with your last couple of moves?
I love it. Well, for the rookie draft, I haven't, necessarily picked out a type specifically. I think for me, it's kind of just drafting the best available. But then for the preseason, for me, I think Daniel Talia would be a really interesting player to bring in if he's keen to come and if we can get him there. I just think it would be, good. I find it really hard to believe that we don't bring in some kind of experienced player this year, just with the 3 older guys that did leave. Even though he is only 29 or turning 30 in a couple of days, I just think he'd be a really interesting player to bring in, not necessarily to be best 22, but to have that backup key position defender would be good to have. And that's me.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. With Talia, I don't believe you actually have to grab him there. I think he is a free agent at this stage, so you might not even have to get him in that. You can just simply bring him in as the free agent. But I think, Talia is definitely an option. He's someone I would love to chat about But let's just do it now. Let's do it now because I have not brought Daniel Talia into the team. He's one that a lot of people have spoken about. I understand bringing in someone who is, I guess, that little bit older, that little bit more experienced down back. I just worry with him that he is that little bit older. He's that little bit slower. At least with what you've done, you've almost answered my question of we still need that young defender. So you brought in Brander, I guess, to do that. I worry very much with Talia. Do we have the money to bring him in as well, like the contract wise? And then does he get a game? Because we've also got Jones Wiedering, and then if you're having Brander potentially in there as well, does a Marchbank do it if he's fit? I worry there's a room for Talia as much as, if you bring him in, that's decent, but is that enough, I suppose? Why did you really, really think Talia was, I guess, the best move?
Yeah, well, I think, to your point, if I definitely would not be looking to outlay a large amount of cash to bring this man to the list. I think it would be more of if he's running out of options, if there aren't other clubs throwing big money for him to come, it would be that kind of scenario. It wouldn't be one that I would consider were we to do that. I think for me, just considering the more experienced players out there, like I said, I just don't see a world where the only players that come in are 24, 25 and under. It just feels like you're going to bring in some kind of experienced head. I do like Hamish Hartlett as well. I think he could be interesting. I'm definitely not expecting Daniel Talia either to be a walk-up starter. He would be there on lower money, if that's possible, and then being that insurance if, God forbid, one of those guys does go down.
It's definitely a great option to have. If you have a Talia on your list as a break in case of emergency, takes over the OMAC sort of Levi role, maybe down back, I think that's good. Yeah. So I guess you've brought in some of these, which means you've had to delist a few players, move them on. Who's come out of the squad to make room for these guys? Because we've got a lot of players who are out of contract. We went through them in sort of last week's episode. So I'll go through them because a couple have seemed like they've either re-signed today or there's news of it. And there's even some updated. I said last week on the last episode, don't judge the list. It may be wrong. And I reckon the next day it was, and Will Setterfield is apparently not out of contract. Whoever had been saying this was wrong. And then there was also another player. I can't remember who it was. It hit some triggers. I think it might have been Nunes. He'd hit some triggers or something, and he's now not on that list. So to run you through the players who Lockie will re-sign and get rid of. We've got Lockie O'Brien, who is out of contract. We have SPS, who we ended up trading away. We've got Mickey Gibbons. We've got Always, who seems like he has or is about to sign on. We got Matthew Cottrell. We got Honey, who looks like he's about to as well re-sign. Parks, Sam Ramsey, Oscar McDonald, Jordan Boyd, and Alex Murkov. So who have you gotten rid of out of those guys to make room for everyone you've brought in?
Yeah, so it's three players that have to go out, unfortunately. So for me, I've got Big Boydie, Ramsey, and your man, Matty Cottrell. I think for me, with these changes, it's the end of the line.
Look, all three of those, I suppose, make sense. Probably my question to this, I'd love to get your reasoning on it. Oscar McDonald, you've decided to keep. He's on the rookie list, so it makes it a little bit harder for some things to make room because you basically can have 37 players on the senior list. You can have 6 rookies. You basically, with the way we're going, because we also have the category B rookie, because you can have basically maximum of 44 players on the AFL list. So that's sort of what we've broken it down to on the Carlton one.
Yep.
So with Oscar McDonald, he's not on that senior list, so it's harder to maybe get rid. You've brought in a Brander. You've brought in your Talia. Where do you see Oscar McDonald, and do you still see a worthy spot on the list for him?
Yeah, incredible question. That was exactly what I was tossing up between him and Cottrell. And I just think there's arguments you could definitely make for both sides. I think in terms of necessity for position, I liked Oscar McDonald here as, obviously we've brought in Talia as a breaking case. We've got Brander as a younger, taller guy. But I think if we're looking at just that kind of end of the line rookie spot, I think McDonald would offer more value to us next year than Cottrell. I'm not holding out hope that either of them are in our premiership side in the future. So for there, it's basically like, well, if we're not going to be really looking to develop either of these guys a long way, it's just about who's going to make the most impact if they do get the call up for a game. And that's Omac for me.
No, I think that makes absolute sense. So you're ready for me to jump into what I've come up with?
I'm excited. And I wanted to come into this with some rogue picks, but it is so hard. It was hard enough for me to look at these trades and be like, is this actually fair? Because there's nothing worse than seeing a trade put together by, I'll say a Carlton supporter, and then thinking, well, there's just no chance in hell that team's going to accept it. So I'm sure
I think that's fair. Look, I wanted so badly to come into this and pick, same thing as you, some real niche player that no one's ever thought of. And all of a sudden, I've fixed every single issue because we spoke about last week. It was, we need that almost like do-it-all midfielder. We probably need a real tackling midfielder. Key tall. We need a ruckman. Maybe that small defender. Those were sort of the big key needs going into this. And unfortunately, I wanted to hit all of those and nail them. I haven't been able to. And maybe this goes on to something else. I like your idea and what you've ended up doing because I definitely wanted to have a really early draft pick. I like a few of the players in the draft, and we can definitely get to that either in this episode if you want to ask me or later in our, draft build-up episodes. A few of the players I would have loved us to target with a pick 6. And I've sort of gone into this going, I want to bring players in because I think we're at that point where we still need to top up a few for needs. I think you always need to do that, try to bring in 1 or 2 a year. But I still wanted to give us a decent draft hand. So I guess I'll take you through it, and maybe this goes against that. But the first player coming in is Adam Chera. I've made the deal, and I've gone, it's pick 6, and that's it. We are not giving anything more. And I suppose I'll give my reasoning for that, as I sort of alluded to, chatting about yours. I think that he is probably worth a little bit more than pick 6 because of where he was drafted and the development he has done. Yep. But he is out of contract. He will not re-sign for Freo. So really what leverage do Freo have? They really only have the fact that in the system we currently are playing in with the AFL that teams have leverage. And so what I would simply say is, okay, what are the scenarios that can literally play out? It is pick 6 for Carlton. He maybe wanted to go to Richmond, but they don't really have the high pick. He wanted to maybe go to Melbourne. They don't have the high pick, and neither team are willing to trade players for it. And so, Freo seem pretty happy to take pick 6, but they maybe want something more. I would say it's pick 6 or nothing. And they would go, oh, well, you can't send him to the preseason draft because Hawthorn and North Melbourne, they've got the salary to pick him up. And I'd go, well, fine. They can have him. But guess what? You get nothing then. So again, almost comes back to that where the best deal that they can currently get, the best pick they can get is pick 6 from us. So at some stage, they're going to get desperate for that. So I'd be playing somewhat hardball. I think you always got to try and make the deal, particularly when a player nominates you. But I honestly would love us to really haggle and say, Freo, you either lose him for nothing to us or any other team in the AFL in the preseason draft, or it's pick 6. We're not paying overs. I guess, what do you make of that deal?
Yeah, I mean, we were discussing this a little bit before the show about the leverage that clubs hold in these situations, and it's a whole nother can of worms that we could open. But yeah, that seems like the popular opinion for Carlton fans. I think when I see Carlton commentary out there, it's kind of the pick 6 and nothing else, and then anybody on the Freo side is like, oh, well, pick 6 is nowhere near enough. But it's like, I think the middle ground is probably around there. And I think we've spoken about this earlier in the year. I think that if that is what happens, I am happy. We bring in the player who's like entering his prime. We know what we know what his floor is, and his floor is good. And his ceiling, who knows what his ceiling is. So I'm happy to do that. I like it.
Cool. So my next thing is SPS wants out. He wants to go to West Coast, and I've gotten back.
Send him to North.
I've gotten back pick 35 for him, which may not be the absolute greatest. I know they have some other picks. They have 29, but I think if you're looking at an SPS, the hard thing there is, we want a second rounder. They've got 2 of them. West Coast are going to play hard ball here. They're going to say, oh, he's worth a third rounder. He's out of contract, which is what we're trying to do with Chera. And I thought if I'm playing hard ball with Chera, then West Coast have every right to play hard ball here. So in the end, we wanted 29. They wanted to give up their third rounder. I think 35 falls in the middle of that, and I think that ends up being pretty fair. So that's what I've gotten for that one. What do you make of that deal just being a straight, I guess, pick swap?
Yeah, I all your reasoning makes sense. I just, it hurts. It hurts so much when you just consider what we drafted him for. Yeah. And then, all the playing matter position, And you know that he's worth more to West Coast than pick 35.
Legit.
But then on our side, I mean, who knows if he's even going to get a game if he does stay next year, with us. Because, if he's falling out of favour, etc. So I think if that deal does happen, I think I would be disappointed, but understand why that is what it is.
Yeah, look, I'd be disappointed too. And I think if we get 29, I'm happy. If it's anything worse than that, I'm disappointed. I worry, and I get it. Carlton supporters will be listening to this being like, we need to get more than 35. That's ridiculous. And I kind of agree, but if you look at it from another perspective, and this is the hard part, and I guess when you talk about the Chera deal, this is where it gets muddied because people say they bring up the stats, they bring up that they're similar, which I know saw it's a question from one of the fans that we'll answer later, and I guess I kind of disagree with that a little bit. But
me too.
Chera was, I guess, best 22. They were developing him as being one of the key parts of their midfield. We've been playing SPS at halfback. Last year, he wasn't in our best 22. That is fact. He could not get into our team for whatever reason. So he really decreased his value. And if you look at, Chera, he's a few years younger. He's that real up-and-comer. He can only really, I guess, go up from here if you're looking at his trajectory year on year. Whereas SPS has gone down. He's not looking like someone that'll jump straight in and just, keep going from where he is at. You're almost hoping that you can get what we saw glimpses of at times. And as much as we all think that SPS is a player and he can be an absolute gun, which I agree with, I think there's something there. Right, as it stands right now, we've just devalued him quite a lot. So that's why I've gone pick 35. It might be slight unders, but my main thing for here, 29 would be perfect. But as I said, I played hardball with Chera, so I've had to do that this way because my main thing, as I said, was trying to get these picks in, trying to get something because we've gotten rid of pick 6. We need to do something. And I guess from there, we need a ruckman, Lockie. We need to bring someone in. And I have looked all over the AFL. I've gone through every single team's ruck stocks to see who we can snag. And I've gone opposite to you. I've tried to go a bit more of a veteran. And we can go into this later because I've got a list of 6 players that we can potentially bring in. The one I've settled on, the one I would really, really like is Callum Sinclair from the Sydney Swans. He's a name that I think everyone will be aware of to some degree. Look, I think we need experience, and that's really what I've gone for here. He's someone that isn't their number one ruckman. They've got Hickey that's taken over. They've got Naismith there as well as another experienced guy. Obviously, his body is pretty banged up at the moment, and they've got some youngsters coming through as well. Amadi pinch hits in the ruck, and McLean can go in there as well. So they've got, I guess, a few different options there. And while from Sydney's point of view, they'd definitely be wanting to keep a Callum Sinclair for depth point of view, I'd come straight in and say, mate, and he has re-signed for 1 year at Sydney at this stage, but I would have had months and months and months to convince this guy to come because he was out of contract. And I would have just gone, mate, Callum, you don't want to play second string. You come to Carlton, you will be playing most games this year as our number one ruckman with TDK developing underneath you. And hey, maybe it gets to a stage where others go above him, but you've only got him on pretty much a 1 year contract. I think you can convince a player like him to come if you can guarantee him that he's not just going to be backup because he didn't play a lot of games last year, had a couple of injuries, but I think when fit, he probably wasn't in their best 22. So Callum Sinclair is someone that I've gone hard for here. And the deal that I think makes a little bit of sense now that he has signed that 1 year contract, because you've got to prize him out. I have gone pick 61 we give away and a future third, but we get a future third back. So pretty much we've swapped our thirds because I think Sydney will be backing themselves in to maybe push for top 4. Yep. As we currently stand, we're going to try and push into the top 8, but maybe Sydney say, nah, Carlton's garbage. They're not going to make the 8. So the pick looks better. They move up a few spots there. And really it's sort of just like pick 61 for Callum Sinclair. What do you make of that trade? Do you think he's someone that we should be looking at to bring in to help those ruck stocks?
You've made a fantastic case there. I love all the points that you made. I think he would be someone that would be really good to bring in. I suppose the biggest question that I have on first impressions is just that fact of him coming in and being the number one ruckman and how you kind of see that playing out. So in that scenario, he comes in as a number one. I'm assuming that means that TDK is starting up forward. So does that mean that it's TDK, Curnow, and Mackay is kind of the three tools that you're running out round one?
Yes, and I think you've seen this work to some degree as well. I think other teams have been starting to play these two ruckmen with at least one of them really being able to play forward. I know that obviously Melbourne, you look at them, Gawn can go forward quite well. Obviously Jackson can as well, which is maybe the issue with the Sinclair where he isn't the best up forward. But I think with the way TDK is developing currently, he's so capable up forward as being a good target. And with having a Charlie Curnow that we still don't, I guess, 100% know what play we have there and will he get back to his best, I can definitely see a scenario where Charlie maybe his body doesn't allow him to play every single game next year. Maybe it's still a little bit of play a couple of games, come out. I think you can definitely go for that, considering of how bad our forward line is with Gov never being, fit. Charlie Curnow's had those injuries as well. We lose a Levi Casbolt down forward. What's Oscar McDonald going to be like? I don't mind having the insurance in the ruck department and then playing the second fiddle there. I think it's a way that a lot of teams seem to be going. And I think Tom's more than capable if you have to have him there, because this year, I think we saw the limitations that TDK has currently at his age. I don't think he can ruck solo by himself. Do we have the support elsewhere? I'm not sure. So I think at least for 1 year, because Sinclair's 32, so he'd be 33 by the end of next year. You probably only have him for 1, maybe 2 years as another developing, pays more VFL the year after. I think it just helps your ruck stocks there by having someone older to guide for at least the first half of the season, being your best 22, and then hopefully him and Pitto can just take him out of the squad for the second half of the year.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, in that scenario, like you said, if it doesn't work out after a month or so, you can obviously change anything that you want to. And I mean, what you're giving up for him there is nothing. So, yeah, I mean, but it's really a low risk kind of thing. I suppose it's just, looking on my side, looking to get in that, 18-year-old ruckman for the future versus, still just, looking in the short term, which I think is a good way to look at it. I like it. Yeah,
and I think my thinking in that is I see TDK as being the future and maybe Pitto being that next backup. Maybe he can take steps, and just having at least those two. You've got Murkov as that development guy who he's so green. I don't think you're going to see him for a while. He really is that. Chuck him on the rookie list. If you get anything out of him, great. If not, it's worth a punt on there. And I think in the short term, if we see TDK as being the number one, he just needs a bit of help. And I think with him being 32, him being down the pecking order a little bit, I'd say if Naismith is fit, he's third string. So really helping them in that third round go up, 4 spots maybe, and then giving him the fourth rounder in 61. I think that works. I think that's absolutely fair. Yeah. Jumping on to my next moves, I'm done with the trades. That's all I'm doing. We will go to the draft with picks 25 and 35, 2 second rounders, and that's where I guess I'm going to be looking at that sort of key defenders type to bring in a youngster, and who knows with one of the other picks. You've got 2 there. Do you take the 2 best? Do you get a midfielder? Just pick the best talent with one of them. But obviously, George Hewitt is coming in as restricted free agent. I don't think we need to chat too much on that. Comes in as that tackling midfielder. And then I've done something sneaky here. You've chatted about bringing Jared Brander in and making him part of a trade. Well, I've said stuff that I'm playing hardball once again. West Coast don't want him. They're not offering him a contract. They don't want to delist him because they want to try and get something back. And I say stuff him. I say get him and into the preseason draft. He's out of contract. He's not re-signing. So that's where you pick him up for absolutely nothing. And I don't maybe rate Brander as being absolutely exceptional. So if this comes to it and he ends up re-signing, or another team snags him in the preseason draft, I'm not going to be too unhappy if we completely miss out on him. I would much rather in this scenario, and maybe that's where yours beats me a little bit, is I want the draft picks, and I would hate for us to put Brander in for SPS and then we either don't get a second rounder, it's just straight swap for those players, or we get a pick 60-something and who cares? What is even that pick? What are we going to do with it? We'll probably pass in the end. I think if you're going to bring in Brander, either do exactly what you've done and maximize your value completely, get a first rounder in, or just risk him and bring him in the preseason draft. What do you make of my moves there?
I like it. I mean, I definitely, when you said that the trades are over and Brander wasn't mentioned, I thought, oh, God, are you going to fit him in here somewhere? So I like that. I mean, your comments about the draft picks quality. I mean, as I was looking at the entire list and then, when making these decisions, I just kind of felt like, what are these players that we're bringing in at the pick 35 that we take to the draft?
Yeah.
Like, what are we really, like this player that we're looking at is going to be at the bottom of our list, like so far from making it into our best 22. When there's guys like, when I've done our best 22, if I'm with these changes, if I'm being realistic, Kemp and Durden, I don't have them in there. And then you put Philp and other guys like that in there who are still super young. I just see it as this isn't a year for me where we're taking like 3 players who are like maybes, which is why I kind of like doing it. Let's just take one pick, keep that first one. But all the logic that you described makes sense.
Yeah. I guess when I'm looking at the draft, I'm putting faith in Nick Austin because we almost saw at the Doggies his eye for talent. And even last year, he had 2 sort of second rounders. He ended up bringing in Corey Durden and Jack Carroll. I think I'm pretty happy with both of those. I think both can be really good players. So I'm backing him in here to be able to find those players. And I honestly believe that in this year's draft as well, it's another compromised one. So it is, I guess, a little bit of a lottery. That's why I've almost tried to give us those 2 picks there to take them in. And is there a scenario where maybe we use those 2 picks to trade up and get a first rounder? I think you can do that. But I was trying to, I guess, make those 3 picks that we can have, my third being that rookie draft pick as according to the AFL there. So I was trying to get those picks and look, with that, I suppose at the end of the day, I'm backing us in. I think there's enough players around there that you can find enough tools in the draft. Just looking at, I guess, Cal Toomey's fantasy phantom draft, it looks like there are a fair chunk of those taller players in that sort of second round. And I think with the lack of development that those kind of players particularly have had because of COVID over the last 2 years, you might find a couple of these absolute gems that just completely, everyone misses them. They slide because they haven't had those games. And we know the tools take longer to develop. And I think if you give him 2 picks there, he should hopefully nail at least one of them. I know our history hasn't shown that, but I'm backing in Nick Austin to get it done. I think I'm almost kind of sick of this. Why get in these second round picks? Because we just waste them anyway. I just don't love that logic. Just because we've done it in the past, like what's the point of ever drafting anyone ever just because we've stuffed up our draft picks? Like I know we had 10 years of getting only Patrick Cripps in the first round. Do we just trade away our first rounders because we never get them right? I think at some stage someone has to. So I guess that's my reasoning for doing that. And the players I've got coming out, SPS obviously traded away. I've delisted a few here. So I've delisted Mickey Gibbons for the reasons I said outlined in the last episode. I just see a lot of people going past him. I would have loved to keep Ramsey, but he's unfortunately on the AFL senior list rather than the rookie list. So he's someone that has to go. We haven't seen much of him. And then on the rookie list, I've made 2 moves. I've gotten rid of Boyd, and then I've freed up another spot. I've gotten rid of Cottrell just because I simply don't see him really doing a lot. Those are the moves I've made. Are you happy with the ins and outs?
Very happy. We're pretty similar at the end of the day in what we're looking for, and like we were saying, it makes it a lot harder to be creative when these players are so heavily linked to us already. But I think if either of those plans played out, I think we'll be one of the winners of the period, to be honest.
I agree. If we can keep some sort of picks and then bring in, Chera, any sort of ruckman, we bring in Hewitt, you bring in a Brander as a project type. I think you're pretty happy with that. Those are both our deals. We will put them up at some stage during the week. You'll see them on the Insta stories, see them on Twitter and Facebook. So we want your comments. Say who wins. What would you guys do in the trade period if you were Nick Austin? Is there any wild players that we have not mentioned that you're like, yes, we need to bring him in? He's the one. Let us know. We always love some wild trade scenarios. Send us your 10-man trades. We'd love to read them. But I guess one of the big, maybe contentious parts is SPS. Now, there is the word going around today that Matthew Voss is having a bit of a chat to him and that there's a slight glimmer of hope that he convinces him to stay. If you're looking at this, Lockie, and it is pick 6 for Chera that looks likely as well, do you see us trading anyone else out to get picks back in? Because we've been talking about getting this second rounder in from West Coast. We'd pretty much go to the draft with 25 and 61 if, that's the deal for Chera. And if they want something else, are we getting rid of another pick in the future? Where does that end up? So do you think there's any other players that we could potentially be looking to move on if an SPS ends up staying so we have some sort of draft picks?
I just don't see it. When I look down the list of players and, I know it seems like disgruntled players come out of the absolute woodwork and catch you by surprise at times. But, to that point, there just doesn't – SPS is the only one that has really had any kind of glimpse that they want to leave. So in terms of, players wanting to go, I don't really see it. And then in terms of the players that have value that we would want to trade, I don't know, it just feels like most of the guys that aren't in our best 22 wouldn't really gather that much excitement out there. Maybe you could say Setterfield, someone like that, who's kind of fringe. What? I don't know. And then, maybe I'm just too, connected to our best 22 players, but, maybe someone like Fisher, some people could see that might have some value out there. Well, I just wouldn't want to see that happen.
Yeah, look, I agree. Setterfield was the first name I thought of, but I've gone, if he's struggling to get into our team, even forget what pick we're getting in for him. Who wants him? And you look at every team looking at midfielders, Gold Coast are trying to get rid of a Will Brodie. Well, at this stage, Will Brodie's better than an SPS, and no one seems like they really want Will Brodie. So how are we shipping Setterfield to anyone? And then you're not going to maximise on the value. So at that stage, I agree. You'd rather just keep him, and if you delist him in a couple of years, so be it. At least you've got that chance. Yeah, probably the only one is, I agree with you there, is Fish. Now, the hard thing with him is you're probably only going to get a second rounder back is what I would imagine his value is right now.
Yeah.
And maybe an SPS, we all see him as being worth more. We see his ceiling being higher, and he's one of those players that we've moved around a little bit. He's gone small forward. He's struggled a little bit. He's had those fitness issues and injury issues that I think have hurt him more than anything. I do see something there, but I just wonder at sometimes, and maybe this is a bit harsh coming from me, it's a bit of a nuffy comment. I think sometimes watching him, I'm not sure he goes and attacks and defends enough. At times, I think I got a little bit frustrated late in the season where I just you need to go harder there. You need to really be running hard in defense to get things done. And I worry that he's one of those many players like an SPS that just doesn't have that, I don't know what the word is, but just 100% desire to be the 100% best player possible. I worry that might be a little bit of an issue with a Fish. I have, however, done a crazy bit of a draft here just because we went maybe a little bit safe with it. I've gone, okay, what could we do to maximize everything? And maybe this goes with a couple of those second rounders that we could get. So I've pretty much done every pick that I did before, but I've said, what if we went to West Coast and we've gone Fisher and SPS for 25 and 35. So for 29 and 35. So we've got those 2 second rounders in, and then now we've got 3 second rounders. So that's way too many. So I've gone, okay, 25 and 29. Can we get back into the first round? And there is a team that seems to not have that many picks that do have a first rounder. So Port Adelaide have 16 and their next pick is 60. So I've gone, you beauty. we'll give them 29 and we'll give them 25. And you know what? We'll throw in a future 4th and we'll get pick 16 and a future 3rd. And so I know that's a lot of picks to throw out there, but it was very similar to a trade that we made with the Western Bulldogs, where basically we gave them 2 seconds and a future 4th for a 1st rounder and a future 3rd. So that's basically what I've done there. I've given them the 2 seconds and made that happen. And so we ended up going into the draft with 16 and 35. What do you make of that deal? I sort of floated a little bit out on Twitter last night. I don't think I really love it. I think I'd much rather keep Fish if we're having to get rid of SPS as well. But what do you make of that? Because you end up, I guess, trading away 2 players that may be fringe at the moment, and you manage to get that 1st rounder back.
Interesting. I'm just absorbing it. Yeah, so it's SPS and Fish for pick 16. Yeah, man, it's so hard to disconnect, isn't it, from the players that you love and look at it realistically. I think for me, again, if that was to happen during the trade period, I think I'd be disappointed. I think the return of 16, it's hard because it's hard not to use the ceiling argument, but we've just always had this hope of what Fish can be, and that he in itself, you'd hope would be better than whatever you're getting at pick 16. But if I'm looking at it realistically, I think there's a world where if Fish doesn't develop any further in a year's time, then he's not in consideration for best 22. I don't think that's unreasonable. And then if that's, if really they're just 2 players that can't get a game and you get 16, then I can understand the argument. But that would be a sad trade for me.
I agree. And look, it's something I just want to float out. It's not something that I'm 100% sitting here going, that's what should happen. And I think if you put it as blankly as SPS and Fisher for 16, I think we need a better draft pick for that. Like, it makes sense if you're using 29 and 25, that probably is only going to get you a 16. Because with the Doggies trade, it was basically 20 and 21 became 11. So because these picks are a bit further out, I think that's a fair value, but is 16 the best for those 2? If you said it was pick 6 or 7, then maybe I'm a little bit more enticed and I'm going, oh, that's a really absolute gun youngster. But I probably wouldn't do it, and I'd rather keep Fisher. But I thought it was an interesting one to throw out that I had. So I guess we'll go into talking about all the potential trades. We've covered most of them, so I don't think we really need to chat about Chera. I guess with Brander, we've chatted a little bit about him. He sort of doesn't want to play the wing position there. We see him as maybe being that key position. Question marks have been thrown around about his competitiveness. Do you really want to bring, I guess, Brander in? Is he the one you perfectly see as being that maybe Jones understudy?
Admittedly, I haven't watched every game of his 22-game career over the last 4 years. But from what I have seen, oh man, I don't know if I can comment on his competitiveness. I just feel like he has those kind of attributes that would be interesting to bring in and add to our list. With the holes that we have, if I look at it at a real high level, that he is someone who is 195 centimetres. He's going to be one of the tallest guys on our list already. He seemingly can play basically any position that we want him to. So he can be flexible in that regard. You can chuck him forward, chuck him on the wing, chuck him in the back line. He just looks like a good footy player, and he's still young. He can still develop. We all say, oh, well, SPS is going to turn into a bloody, Brownlow medal contender when he moves clubs. That's the same for players like this who can just shine when they move. So they're all the things that I kind of consider as the positives. And then, there's got to be knocks on every player. I've seen people saying his disposal isn't great. And then, your comment about the competitiveness. So, but is that a worry for you?
It is a little bit. I've chatted to a couple of different people about this that know their footy pretty well, because I just wanted to get other people's opinions, because I've seen a bit of Brander, but I think I'm like you. I've never sat down and watched a West Coast game and be like, oh, I'm keen to watch this Jared Brander kid and see what he's got. But so I've tried to do a bit of a deep dive this week, and it looks like, he as a junior, he played as pretty much as a forward for most of the time. He played a little bit in defence, but he was predominantly a forward, and he loved it. He said his favourite position is when he goes and plays key position. They moved him to a wing, which is potentially because of that competitiveness. And like we've thrown that around, I suppose that maybe an SPS is someone that doesn't really look like they want to completely train and bust everything out there on the field. And maybe that is similar to a Brander. And I think if you're playing one-on-one, it has to be you putting every single thing on the line to win the ball, to make a contest. And if there are those issues and question marks on his competitiveness, in a system like West Coast that I think is really good and can really develop players, we've seen them do it for quite a while, I worry if you bring him into our system that we're going to be able to get the best out of a player like that has almost been forced out of position onto the wing because they don't like him there in a team that I think they need to keep starting to foster these young, tall players because a lot of their age is starting, a lot of their list is starting to age. It gives me a bit of a worry. I think if we can pretty much get him for nothing, then I'd love to bring him in as a project player. I think that's absolutely fine. But like I touched on before, if he makes the SPS trade deal watered down and we get pretty much nothing back for it, I'd be disappointed for us to bring him in just for SPS. I think I'd almost rather us try to find someone else in, whether that we get him in the draft. I don't know who the player is. Is there a mature player out there that can fill the list like I suppose we did in Oscar McDonald this year? I think I'd much rather that than wasting the return on investment that is an SPS.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's interesting to know. I mean, from the limited research that I did on him, my assumption was he was playing on the wing because, you know, there's Nat Nui, there's Barras, Kennedy, McGovern, Allen, Vardy, like just so much height in this team that he was kind of being pushed to that role. But, you know, if it's right to other things, then that makes sense. And
yeah, look, I just want to butt in. I don't know 100%. Like, I don't know 100% exactly why he's been moved, but that was potentially the narrative that me and a couple others had come up with on because of the lack of competitiveness that gets thrown around. Maybe that's why he played a lot of the wing because you probably really need that more than if you are a midfielder on the wing. You can almost play that uncontested type. And yeah, who knows? Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah, and I mean, I like to look at these things from like the risk reward perspective. And if we go your scenario, you've delisted Cottrell so that you can take this guy in the preseason draft. Like, get him in, and if he doesn't deserve a game, then we won't see you in 2023. So I don't think it would be very risky to do it like that.
Agreed. Looking at the SPS pick, we've chatted a bit about it. What do you actually see happening? What is your prediction of what actually comes in for this deal?
That's a really good question. I was going to ask you the same thing about the Chera deal, because it just kind of feels like it's just so solid that it's going to be like 6. But it doesn't feel like that with this. It feels like the opinions are much more widespread. I don't have a prediction currently. Do you have one?
I'm hoping it's my deal and it's at least 35, but I don't even know. Who knows?
I don't think
the media threw out saying that we're not really going to play hardball, but now you throw into the fact that maybe Vossi wants him. So does that make us play harder because we don't want to lose him? It is such a tricky thing. And as we sort of said, if we don't get at least a second round of straight back for him, it's just going to be such a waste. It's like, what have we done here?
I would be baffled if we got anything worse than pick 35. I feel that just seems crazy robbery if true. But you never know.
Particularly when you hear West Coast saying, like the quotes are coming up being like, oh, they see such a big role for him. They think he has massive potential. Yeah. He's perfect for what they're trying to build. It's like, yeah, you're not given a 4th rounder for that then. Like if you think he's going to be your missing piece, then pay up, boys. Come on. None of this, 4th round, 6th round pick. We're not doing a Reece Palmer and giving pick 178. It's not happening here.
The dreaded 9th rounder.
So, it's a tough one. Let us know what you think would be for these deals, the Chera and the SPS, because we'd love to get your thoughts. I guess looking at the rest of the positions that we saw as being the needs, maybe we've touched on this as well with the rucks. You maybe see us wanting to go really young. Are there any other, maybe if you went down the experience path, or maybe it's just like a 24-year-old that's been in the system for a couple of years and maybe like a Pitto. Do you think that we'd go down that route? What do you see as being the ideal scenario for ruck depth at this stage? Because it's clear that we just need some bodies in.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably a good time to jump to one of the listener questions because I was going to bring this up when we were chatting rucks earlier. Andrew's Blues asks about Laddams. And I'd love to hear what your opinion is on him because I know that when he has come up against us, he's looked like the best ruckman in the entire league, which gets me excited. One, would you want to see him in navy blue? And two, do you think there's any way it does happen?
As far as wanting him at the club, he'd be at the top of my priority list of guys I would want in. He's at that age where he's ready to explode. As you said, anytime he comes up against us, he kills us. Every time I see him play, I just like what he does. He's a good ruckman. He's one of those that can go forward as well. So if you had him and TDK in the same team, it almost looks similar to the Maxi Gawn Jackson of Melbourne, where you got the two that can do it. If you get an injury, say a Kerno doesn't hold up, if Harry's shoulder isn't 100%, touch wood. I'm touching my desk here to make sure this doesn't happen. Yeah. But if you get a couple of injuries, you can float at Laddams down there and it's not a big issue. He's someone that is so perfect, I think, for what we're trying to build. Some people have thrown out and they don't think that TDK is the 100% nailed on first ruck. He's more of that second forward kind of guy. And I think Laddams can help in making those two really good together. My issue is I tried to make this happen. I can't see us making a deal. So first off, his contract was back-ended at Port Adelaide. So do we even have the salary cap is the first issue. And if you're going to say we do have it, and that's fine, let's act as if we do have it. What's his worth? It's probably at least a second rounder, you'd imagine, even though they've got a lot of tools. Yeah. It'd be around that second rounder. So do we have the picks for that? I think we've brought in one for an SPS. So do you simply just take one of them to the draft with pick 61 and use the other? Like where do you see it? Do you want Laddams in and is it possible for us to even make a deal?
Well, when I think about having Laddams or Sinclair as being the guy to come in, I mean, one excites me a hell of a lot more than the other because like you said, it's like with him and TDK as the two, like that's like our 10-year ruck plan locked in. And two guys that they could be anything in the ruck department. So, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I haven't really seen a whole lot of people discussing what he would actually get back for Port. Yeah, that's the thing. Giving up pick 61 and whatever it was for Sinclair is absolutely nothing. But, yeah, especially if you're giving up pick 6 for Chera, and then if we don't get what we want for SPS, then it might be hard. You might be looking at using next year's picks.
And then you look at like Portland, because they don't have that many picks this year, how much are they going to be wanting next year's picks? And you look at all the clubs, I suppose, that he's looking at going to, like a Geelong, maybe a Doggies. Like there's a lot of teams out there that do need a ruckman. And if he comes in, like I look at Geelong right now and he makes so much sense for a team like that where they've got Reece Stanley that isn't really that amazing. He's older as well. You can easily throw in Laddams and it makes sense. Whereas if he's coming to a Carlton, he might have that opinion of, well, am I in front of or behind De Koning? Like, where do you see it? Because his issue seems to be he wants to be the number one ruck. He doesn't want to play this forward role. And Port have got so many players. They've got Lysette there. It makes sense for him to go to a team that is 100% going to play him as the number one. And I don't know if we can offer that completely. It's a player that, if we can get him done, beautiful. But I still want us to be attacking the draft. I don't think we can go many years without bringing in a lot of talent. We didn't seem to do a lot last year because of obviously the Saar deal. If we're doing it again this year with Chera, and who knows, does that deal, do we have to throw in another pick? I feel like once you've committed to throwing your high-end picks onto a deal, it just makes it harder to get other things done. And having to still bring in 3 players in the drafts, it's tough. It's tough. I can't see it happening. I'm not sure we can get it done.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
So I guess looking at other players, is there anyone else out there that you think is a possible player to bring in?
I mean, the only other name, I've just always really liked Hamish Harlett as a player. I've not that I've ever heard him being linked to us, but I mentioned earlier just about this idea that it just seems like we're going to bring in at least one of these kind of experienced players on like a 1-year deal. Do you have any thoughts on him, on whether you could see that happening or whether you'd even want it?
I can't see it happening personally. Maybe there's a connection there with Vossi.
Yeah.
But gee, how many halfback flankers do we need in this team currently? I just don't see a spot for him at all, and I just don't see the need. I think we've got Sard, we've got Williams, we've got Doherty, we've got Newman, we've got a Stocker down there. Like we're loaded in the halfbacks. I think we have priorities of other places. Our salary cap is probably at that spot where you can't keep topping up too much, and you've got to be smart about it. Yeah, I just see bigger issues in this list. If he can play a small lockdown role, beautiful, but I don't think he can. And I think we're loaded.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, looking at other players to bring in, I'm definitely not of the opinion that we should be bringing in 5 or 6 seasoned players. So when we're already locking in basically Hewitt and Chera, hopefully then Brander, it's then there's not a whole lot of things I'm looking to fill, but is there guys that you still like?
I mean, I've got a couple more in the ruck stocks that are potential options that I'd love to get your thoughts on. So I've gone pretty big here for a few of them. I don't know how realistic they are, but I think it's worth a chat because we mentioned Laddams, we mentioned me trying to get Sinclair out of Sydney, which might be unlikely because of their injuries at their ruck stocks. But you look at the doggies. Now, they've been linked with the Laddams. If they bring him in, it's him, it's English. They've got Sweet there as well as a youngster. Steph Martin, then he's out of contract. Ooh. He becomes 35 at the end of this year, so he is older. If you bring in Laddams, that pretty much says that there is no spot for Steph Martin. He's only on that one. He's out of contract. So I would be in his ear saying, hey, we need that experience like I've tried to get Sinclair into the club. We probably should have gone after him last year. As a tie-over for a season, you could do a lot worse than bringing in a Steph Martin.
You could do a lot worse. I like it. I think that logic chain makes sense. If they were the team to land Laddams, then it does make sense. Otherwise, that's where it kind of just seems crazy that this guy's going to play on 3 teams in 3 years. But if that was to happen, then you're right.
I guess I've got another crazy one that is similar to that where it's like it's probably not super likely, but you can make an argument for it, is St. Kilda has been linked with a Laddams. So you bring him in, you've got Rowan Marshall. What happens with Paddy Ryder? Now, I'm not saying he's elite still at this stage. He's 33, but another veteran ruck option that he'd then be behind 2 youngsters. He's probably not going to play a lot. I think you could do a lot worse than getting a guy like him in, even if he doesn't play every single game. He's there on the list and he can help develop a Pitt. He can help develop De Koning. He played a lot last year and the year before. The Saints seemed like a better team when he was in. So he's another one of those older options that if others moves happen, you're probably not giving away a lot either for him.
I don't mind it either. So, I mean, it sounds like we're kind of aligned. Are you of the opinion that we are going to bring in somebody of this older age group, or do you think it's just kind of, if it fits, it'll happen?
Yeah, I'm just not sure if they're available as it stands. I think if someone becomes available, then it's something they're probably looking at. But currently, I just don't see the players. That's the hardest thing. Like I tried to, throw a Cal Sinclair out of nowhere, and I don't think that's super likely now that he's signed. It's hard at this stage. I'm not sure. Like the other 2 players I have to throw out there at you is GWS have 2 guys that are out of contract. They have Matty Flynn, who's 24. They have Kieran Briggs, who's 22. Both seemingly behind a Bruce, but they've struggled with their ruckman. Obviously, Mumford now is retiring. They're not going to throw him out there for another year. Bruce has had his injury issues. They definitely will be re-signing one of these players. I would assume that would be Briggs because he's younger and I think he can play a bit more forward. So there's a chance that maybe one of those becomes available. There's a chance that they just re-sign both because they've struggled so much. But if one of those becomes available, would you be happy with picking up one of those for depth, or are you thinking that's just another pedo, but maybe just a bit more of a list clogger that we just don't need to keep filling it with ruckman that maybe can't be that first string?
Interesting. I mean, I don't know a hell of a lot about those guys. It's hard because, we've got Murkov there now. Hopefully McDonald is going to be fit this season as like the backup ruck. Yeah, look, if it's someone that I'm going to have to fence it on that one. It's so hard to predict what this ruck situation is going to look like because, like you said, like TDK could return from this preseason, rock up round one, and we go, wow, he is ready to ruck on his own. Like that kind of blow-up could just happen, or it could be exactly the same situation where we're like, all right, we need to have Pitto and him in there, and then Pitto does his ankle, and then TDK needs a rest, and then we're in a hole, and we should have brought in one of these guys. Hope you like that for a fence sit.
I mean, look, there's a chance Pitto comes out and becomes the number one ruckman. He's only 25. I don't even think he's played 50 games yet. So there's a chance that he all of a sudden explodes. Sometimes these ruckmen take a few years. And I can see that that's a possibility. He seemed to be really good in his first year. Dropped off a little bit this year. Who knows? New system, new culture. He could explode. I wouldn't really want Flynn because of his age being 24. I think it's just another Pitto. Briggs would be someone at 22 that I think you're starting to get that Laddams kind of player that could maybe take the step up. I like that he has a bit more forward craft to him, can take a good contested mark from the highlights that I've seen of him. I'd be more aligned with either maybe doing what you're doing is bringing in a youngster that's maybe been there a couple of years, or just veteran ruckman is my number one priority. If there's anyone out there that we can snag, they don't have to play, just someone on the list, break in case of emergency, be what Cruiser we almost wanted him to be until his body just shut down. I think that'd be ideal. Probably the last couple of questions I have before we go to all the fan questions, because I know I've been running a little bit long in this one, is we touched on basically another position that neither of us have addressed, which is small defender, that we both believe is probably a bit of a need. Did you come across anyone that you thought could do that? Do you think it's internal is where we're going to see that for this year, or do you think that's something to target in the draft?
Mate, I'm almost putting it in the too hard basket because we spoke about this the other night and we're like, Stocker will probably do a good job of it, but we want him to move into the midfield, and who knows if Plowman if he's for the long term. It didn't really cross my consideration because I don't know I don't know who it is that's out there that could come in, and I just don't see where it could be on our list at the moment. And it may be not what a lot of people would want to hear, but it may just be that Stocker has another season down there, that he's got this role. I saw people saying today that, the expectation is still that Williams is going to be this midfielder. So you're putting him back into the midfield after another preseason, Chera, Hewitt, Dow getting more time, well, then Stocker might just have to be that guy. So not really.
Look, I wish I could agree with you and bring some amazing targets to this and say that this is the player to bring in, but I just don't think that there's a viable option out there. I've tried to look, and those small lockdown defenders are really hard to find. There's not a lot of them that are ever available. I guess, who can we even pick up? There's no one out there. They're hard to find, and you mentioned, all these midfielders coming into there. I think it's almost, like you said, that too hard basket where we simply just have to look at it and go, it's just not a player we can bring in. We already struggled to try and bring in maybe like a Brander. We can't bring in a Laddams. So trying to trade for someone just doesn't make sense considering we've committed to so many players and salary caps. So I think at least for one more year, you go Plow, you're doing okay in that position. Who knows? Maybe this new system with a Voss in there, maybe the midfielder actually chasing players and the ball not coming in there so often that it'll be so much easier. And maybe a Plowman will excel in this. Maybe you can play a Stocker in there and it's going to be fine. Does a Newman come in there and play a bit more of a defensive role? Does a Williams? Does a Sard? We've still got Kemp in there as another option. I think we've got enough that for 1 year, if we can get this defensive system right, it's hopefully not going to be too bad and we can just nullify the opposition. And then who knows, maybe we draft someone in that can develop. Is there someone else on the list? I think we've got maybe bigger needs at the moment that we can probably get away with it. Like, I know so many people want us to move on from Plowman, but if we have Plowman in for one more season as that small lockdown defender until we solve it next year, I don't see that as being the worst scenario possible.
Yeah, and Kemp is a good shout that you mentioned. I did forget about him. It kind of feels kind of right that maybe he could, find his way back there before being thrown into the midfield. So that's another option as well. So, yeah, I agree with all you said there.
And then I guess, we touched on a little bit of tall defender. We seem like it's Brander. And you've also brought in Italia. If we say we don't bring in Italia and we just bring in Brander, is that enough for you? Or would you still like us to hit the draft and try and find the next replacement for a Liam Jones?
It's tricky. I definitely think there needs to be something. So if it's not Brander or Talia, I wouldn't be happy with that. I think there has to be at least one. If Brander was to come in and the intention was that he was going to be that future fullback, that's where they saw him, that's where he wants to play, etc., then I'm happy with that because, obviously there's Marchie. We don't know where he's going to come back, but there's the idea of McGovern being able to go down there potentially. McDonald maybe could be that guy. I think if we bring in one, I would be happy with that. But it all depends on how. If we end up going in with 3 draft picks and then there's a good guy there, and we bring in 2, no dramas at all. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I personally really want us to target someone because I don't know how much you can bank on a Brander, and even if he does become good, I don't think it's a bad thing to have too many of them. What you end up trading one for picks, I don't see that as being a bad option. Because, I just personally don't maybe see and back Brander in as much as being that perfect player. If West Coast are getting rid of him, is he the best option? I'm not too sure. I think our stocks are pretty average considering Marchbank's been injured for so long. So I like the idea of having maybe Brander as being that placeholder for a couple of seasons as someone who's a bit more experienced. He's got a bigger body than a fresh 18-year-old that we're throwing in. I definitely want us to be looking after one. Last things I will touch on is there's probably 2 players that have been rumoured at stages, and I want to get your thoughts on whether you would have really liked them to come in. Lipinski is the first one who's now nominated a Collingwood. There was earlier rumours midway through the season that we'd bring him in. Are you annoyed that we're not going for him, or are you happy with the moves that we are making instead?
Yeah, not for me. He's never been one that really excited me when those rumours come up, nor has he excited me when I've really watched the Dogs. So, not for me. I feel like you were a bit more partial to him at the time.
I liked him, and I think as a winger, as a bit more of a specialty winger, I think that was something our squad needs. Now that we're bringing in a Hewitt into the real midfield, and it looks like obviously Chera, you've got him that can play wing, can really go in the midfield. I just don't think you can do all those deals. And you mentioned chucking a Williams that it's come out today that they still see that as being where they see him. And honestly, when he was in there, I didn't think he was that bad. When we did play him in the midfield, his take needs work. And again, a different system. Does it get better? I wouldn't completely write off that, Zach Williams can't be that gun mid. You get a Cunningham. Where does he fit into here? Does the Zach Fisher come in? There's no O'Brien. Does he stay? I just don't see the room for a Lipinski at the moment. He's someone that I'd love to have in the squad if you can. Yeah. But I wouldn't want to give away maybe a second rounder with the other ins. Probably the other one is a Jake Riccardi. Both of us pretty high on him as a talent. What do you do? Do you think that he would have been a viable option? What do you make of it?
I think I'll need you to remind me on what the latest is. Did he sign a new deal with the Giants? Is he off the table?
He's still out of contract. I believe they've potentially tabled a couple of year contract to him, but as of my knowledge right now, he is not re-signed. But I guess even with that, let's just say maybe like my Callum Sinclair scenario where he was out of contract, potentially signing. If you are in his ear from the end of the season till now, you probably bring him over the line. Is he someone that you wish we maybe targeted as a big tall, or do you think that him maybe not being that out-and-out defender, we've maybe got on enough forwards already?
Man, I mean, going off what I've seen of him, when I've watched him play, he looks awesome. So, I think he would have been an interesting guy to look at bringing in. Like you said, don't know whether he necessarily is going to be able to plug the spots that we need, being primarily the tall forward, which we do seem to have a bit of a backlog with now. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I feel like if he did still end up coming through the door and we didn't give up a lot, then that'd be great. But I just don't see a scenario with similar to a lot of the guys you mentioned, where we wouldn't have to give up something significant for a guy who, is he above McGovern on the pecking order right now?
Yeah, look, ideally, if you get, honestly, I think you would agree, you'd take Riccardi over Gov. So if there was some way you could shift Gov and get, again, you're not going to get much back for him and we'd probably have to pay half his salary anyway. But if you could manage to shift Gov out for something and then bring in Riccardi for similar picks or whatever, I think that's a massive win. But like I think we've said on most of these deals, we need a ruckman, we need a small defender, we need a tall defender, we need midfielders. I don't think we need that forward. And look, maybe Riccardi, he played a bit of like the VFL or whatever GWS are playing. So I don't think the NEFL was going on. So who knows? Whatever they were playing in, he was playing about a bit of like halfback, sort of floating as an intercept defender. Got like 40 disposals or something. So he can obviously shift down back and play some role there. But yeah, like many, I just don't think he fits all the needs. And who knows? Maybe he only signs a couple years and next year we revisit and see what happens. As it stands, I think there's bigger priorities that we need to put our picks towards. So with that, let's lead into the fan questions that we've put it out to you guys. We've chatted for quite a while on what we would do and everything, but obviously you guys will definitely have some questions for us. So Lockie, hit me up with any. I'm very excited to hear what the people want answered.
Sounds good. Well, yeah, we've got some good ones in here as always, and with the pretty common themes, we've got a fair bit of overlap, but I'll of course still read them out. So we've got Anthony asking about if we see the club recruiting a defender this trade period, and who that specifically would be, which we've touched on a fair bit, and obviously you're very keen on that. Got to go in here from Mark DT. This is an interesting question that a lot of people I've seen bring up who maybe aren't as sold on Chera as maybe we are. Would you rather see Chera in our midfield or give more of our young kids a chance? And he's talking about Stocker, Philp, Ramsey and Carroll, Downlop, all those guys. He doesn't want to pay overs for Chera. And we've got all these talented kids that need to go. Where do you kind of sit on that at the moment?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It really is. I understand the argument. I mean, we can go into it now because I brought it up and I see a question here from Navy Blue Baggers who says, when you compare SBS stats to Chera's, there isn't a massive difference. So how come Chera is apparently a gun worth pick 6 and more, but SPS is barely worth a second rounder? I don't think stats tell everything. And I don't know how much guys watch Fremantle, and I don't want to be harsh with this just because I have a different opinion, but I see that get thrown around and I've seen a lot of people do it. And my first thought is, does anyone watch Freo play? Because I don't know in any world where you could see what Chera does and compare him and say that him and SPS are on the level playing field. I think Chera is 10 times the player SPS currently is. And maybe that's like too much. And I've maybe been a little bit, hyperbolic there. But I just think that if you're comparing them, as I said earlier, one is just is a couple of years younger and has slowly progressed and gotten better every single year. And you look at the back half of this season in particular, I think that's the best way to really project the next season is look at those last sort of 5 or 6 games. And particularly with a Fife out of that team, he was their, one of their better midfielders. Obviously, you got Brayshaw starring, Mundy playing really well, Sarong coming along. Chera was up there with his disposals every single week. And you throw in what he is into this midfield. He can play inside. He can go on the wing. He's young. He's ready. He's hungry. I just see him as being an absolute superstar in the making that has already proven so much. Whereas in SBS, what is he currently? Is he a midfielder? Is he a forward? How good is he? He's currently not even in our best team. They're worried about Tank. They're worried about, does he have the preparation, the commitment? None of these things have ever been said about Chera. He's a superstar in the making. He has all the attributes. He prepares nicely. And so I see him as being a lot over that. As far as the question, I suppose, when you're going, we've got a few guys in there that maybe haven't had a go like a Stocker. Stocker's probably the one, I'd love to see them both get a go. I see Chera kind of maybe being a bit more of that outside type that we don't have. And I think we're at this stage where we're desperate for players. Chera hits the age demographic perfectly. He's that, he hits, I think he's 20. How old is he? 21, 22?
22 in a couple of days.
Yeah, so he is perfect in line with that age of the guys we've recently drafted to really take us forward in the next few years. Compare that to a Stocker that, as much as we love him, I think there's room for him to have a go, but he maybe hasn't proven it as much as Chera to this stage. And I guess you throw in the names of Philp, Ramsey, and Carroll. And Carroll, I think, still needs a few years to develop. I think there's an opportunity for him later on. Ramsey and Philp, I mean, we haven't seen anything of Ramsey. Philp's been injured. I don't rate either of those ridiculously highly. So we need to run deep in midfield. And if you look at all the teams, they have at least 6 guys that can go in there. Currently, it's what? Walsh, Cripps, Kennedy, Dow, Curnow? That's only 5 players that we really have that can go in there. You throw in a Hewitt, that probably takes out Curnow's role. You throw in a Chera, he's arguably better than a Kennedy and has a higher ceiling than Kennedy. I understand overpaying, but I just see him honestly as being so far above what we currently have that I think if he's available, being his age and everything, that you just bring him in. I've chatted for heaps. So what is your perspective on that, Lockie?
No, I really agree with so much of that. And to your original point, we would love everybody to think that they are the same player, SPS and Chera. If everyone wants to look at the stats and say they're worth the same thing, be my guest.
Yeah.
We'll take a first round pick for SPS back.
Yes.
I agree. It's just not even close. Chera came third in their best and fairest last year. SBS is just so completely far off it in our team. He was 4th in their team in disposals. We spoke about it the other day. We want these players who are just going to come in and they're going to get 22 disposals every week, guaranteed. And if you have enough of those players in the midfield, you're just going to dominate the clearances. It's just how it goes.
But they're saying as an argument that Chera got like 2 more votes than Paddy Dow in the Brownlow. What do you make of that?
I love that argument too. because the Brownlow exactly shows that. So, yeah, look, I agree with what you're with everything that you said just then. It's he's still so young. Just get it done.
At the end of the day, I can only go off what I see, and I take a very heavy interest in Fremantle for a lot of different reasons. But I watch a lot of their football, and Chera is one of my favourite players that they have, and I just think he fits us so much in every single capacity. Do you have any other questions for us, Lockie?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've answered the one from Andrew's Blues about Laddams. This is similar to the one you asked before about SBS. I like you putting your stamp of approval on something, and then we can refer back to this when you're a prophet. James Orico, what other pick or picks would we use in addition to pick 6 to finalise the deal with Freo? So interestingly worded there, kind of assuming that pick 6 isn't going to be enough. I'd like to look at this question as sitting here today, we know what you want to get done. What do you think the lovely trade radio poster on their social feed is going to show when that trade's done?
Ideally, it'd just be pick 6, as we've both argued throughout this episode. If there has to be another pick in there, like Freo keep throwing out a second rounder, and that is way, way overs. Like if we're giving a second rounder, like even if they gave a third back, I'd still be so unhappy with that because one, it can't be this year's second rounder because we just need the picks in this year's draft, considering we're giving rid of 6 picks. So what, you're saying a future? I'd hate for us to give that. If it was the only future pick swap that I would maybe be okay with, but I still don't want to do it, is us giving a future 3rd and getting a future 4th back. But even then, it's like I don't want to be in this scenario, which is what I tried to do, particularly in my Nick Austin put the hat on. What can you do as a list manager? My big thing was this year we're kind of slightly hampered by the fact that we gave a future 3rd to Sydney to try and get Corey Durden in, which I love that move, but now we don't have that 3rd to play with to do deals. And I wanted to try and have pretty much every single one of our picks. That's why I got the 3rd back for Sydney's 3rd. Yeah. And I'd hate for us to start throwing in these second round picks and then next year it's, we need to try and get a 3rd rounder back in and trying to just keep making deals because you sell yourself short for the future. So Yeah, look, if you had to hold a gun to my head and say, if you had to give other picks, what would it be? It's future third, get a future fourth back. But even that I don't like. What about you?
Interesting. Yeah, it doesn't seem realistic to me that it's just going to be pick 6. I'm going to say that I think Austin is going to work magic, and there'll be a pick swap in our favour somewhere. So it'll be 6, and whatever that'll be, we'll look back on this and go that he did a great job with this deal. So that's where I'll put my money.
Hopefully, let's say we do the deal that I just said, the third round for a fourth round, that they whiff their third round and then we just get an absolute steal with our fourth, and we look back and we go, we're geniuses. Nick Austin, he's playing 4D checkers.
4D checkers. Exactly right. Exactly right. Cool. Yeah, I mean, the last couple of questions that we have are kind of real big picture sorts of questions, but I'd love to hear kind of maybe your quick thoughts on them if you want to.
Yeah, let's definitely. I mean, look, we've been going this long, so if people are still listening at this stage, why not go another hour, Lockie? Hit me with it, and we can do it. We can do it.
Michael Ceravolo, what are our thoughts on AFL free agency? As in,
maybe we are doing another hour.
Yeah, we're going to need 3 hours. So basically centered around the need to trade for out-of-contract players. Do you have kind of a 60 to 90 second pitch on where you see this?
Trying to know. We talk about this every time we chat. This is almost another episode. I'll try to make it as brief as possible. I hate it. I think most people hate it. I want a very open free agency where basically there are... I can lay out my plans in a future episode if you really want to know it.
Yeah.
But basically... Yeah, clubs are able to trade any player they want anywhere, which opens things up. Players, there's like no restricted free agency. Once you're out of contract after X amount of years, you can go anywhere because, I just think it's very silly that we're currently in this format where players have been on a list for a contract. They've been offered a contract. It's not as if they're still got 2 years to run. They've finished their contract and they don't want to be there anymore for whatever reason. Maybe they don't like the way that things have happened, like in SPS, and he's like, I'm out of contract. That's good. See ya. And now it's the clubs have leeway and they have to get something back, and it's beholden on the club to make the deal. It just doesn't make sense. And definitely, hopefully, things can start to change, because it seems like every year there's one or two of these trades and everyone's losing their minds going, how can anyone have leverage when you don't contract the player?
Yeah, we have the exact same opinion on this as many people do. In these specific examples, and we were discussing earlier, like it's the same with SPS. Like it goes both ways. If we shouldn't have leverage in this situation. If he has fulfilled his contract with us, he should be able to do what he wants. So I honestly think that would be a good episode at some point when we need some content.
Yeah, and it's worse with Brander, because West Coast have sort of come out and said, we're not offering you a contract, but because of these rules, we're not going to delist you because we can maybe get something for you, which is just like, you should not be able to do that. It makes no sense. Yeah. Don't even get me started on compensation for losing players, because that's a whole nother argument. But what is your other big time-consuming question you got for me, Lockie? I do love that one, though.
Well, we know that it's coming from the godfather himself, Timmy Dubb. So I'll read it verbatim from him. Do list managers have too much power at AFL clubs? I think of EPL, and at least at West Ham, the manager is having a major say on who we recruit. Now he has the type of player that fits his values and game style. Should Voss have more say, and Austin does the searching / deal making? How do you see that playing out?
It's a great question. It's really hard to know. Probably the hardest thing currently with a Voss is he's maybe coming in so late to it that he's not going to have any training session with any of these players before the trade is done. Yeah. Like, we're going to have all these new players in, and then his first training session is going to happen. I think to some degree he will have a say in what he wants, and I think it probably happened throughout the whole process of the coaching, where he would have said, I like this player that's out of contract. I'd maybe be looking to bring this player in. I think maybe this is what the list needs. I think there were definitely those discussions, and to a point, like we're looking at now, maybe he's really seeing SPS as being the player he wants, and he's really trying hard to convince him to stay, saying that, I see you as being my best 22, stay. Yeah. I think we've got something here. I think probably eventually, maybe next year, he'll have more of a say because he's been there and he can go, I want this player and this player. I think at some teams like maybe at Hawthorn, you've seen that Alistair Clarkson over recent years has had a bit more of a say of, I want this player in, I want this. But yeah, I'm not sure we'll ever maybe go that far where it seems like the managers in English soccer just pick all the players they want. But I think hopefully after maybe Vossi has seen the team a bit more and what he has, that he can then work with the team and say, I need this kind of player. But I just don't see that happening at this short a time. What do you see that scenario playing out, Lockie?
Yeah, I think you answered that really well. I think we all hope that it's a kind of a collaborative process at the end of the day, as these kind of things should be. But and I'm sure he'll have some input this year. But if he has too much of an opinion on some of these things, it's probably not a good idea because, like you said, he needs to, get his feet in the water a bit first and get to know everybody and that kind of thing. And again, like these, I'm not trying to dispel anybody's journalism here, but there's the rumours about him trying to convince SPS to stay. And, we'll see if that's true or not.
Yeah, is that just a bargaining chip for Carlton? We're trying to put that into the media to make it seem like we can get something back for SPS. Who knows? But look, it's a really good question. Thanks, Timmy Dub, as always. Look, that's going to wrap this one up. We've been chatting for ages. We've covered pretty much everything in this trade period that is about to start. And as far as content coming up, we're probably going to play it a little bit by ear. As soon as there's news or if things are happening and we want to have our say on it, we'll be coming out for an episode. But really, let us know what content you want us to cover, how much you want to hear from us over the trade period, because it sounds like we're going to be pretty busy and involved in this one. But if there's breaking news, we'll be out here. But look, thank you, as always, for listening. Remember to follow us on any socials at Navy Blue Corner. But that's going to finish this episode. See you guys next time.